When I first moved into Lakeside Ridge, I thought I'd finally found peace. A quiet lake, a wraparound porch, and a fridge that didn't buzz like a dying transformer. I'd spent years in the city working as a police officer, and after my promotion to police commander, I promised myself I'd take a little time off the grid. So when the realtor showed me a cozy cabin tucked between towering pines, I was sold. The only downside? A homeowners association. "Don't worry," the realtor had said. "They're mostly retirees. They just like things tidy." He lied. The first time I met Karen, the self-appointed president of the HOA, she was standing on my porch before I'd even unpacked. Blonde bob, clipboard, sunglasses that looked like she stole them from a traffic cop. "New resident?" she chirped, looking me up and down like I'd just trespassed on Buckingham Palace. "Sure am," I said, smiling. "Name's James Holt." She squinted. "Well, Mr. Holt, we have a few rules around here. No unregistered vehicles, no outdoor laundry, and definitely no deliveries past 8 p.m. Got it?" "Deliveries?" I asked. "Like groceries?" "Exactly." She flipped a page on her clipboard like she'd just won a cross-examination. "Noise carries across the lake. We value serenity." I nodded, mostly to keep my blood pressure stable. "I'll be sure to whisper when I unpack my apples." She frowned, clearly not used to pushback, then strutted off toward her golf cart. Pink seat cushions, HOA logo on the side, and a little flag that said, "President." That was the moment I knew peace wasn't going to come easy. 2 weeks later, I learned just how deep her obsession with control went. I'd been on shift at the precinct when my phone buzzed. A delivery driver, nervous voice, heavy accent, said someone stopped him at the entrance gate. "She say I can't come in," he said. "She say no food deliveries allowed. She stand in front of my car." I sighed. "Let me guess. Short lady, blonde bob, armed with a clipboard?" He hesitated. "Yes, sir." I told him to wait. I was only 10 minutes away. When I pulled up, I saw it. Karen, standing in the middle of the private drive, one hand on her hip, the other waving that same clipboard. The poor driver sat frozen in his little hatchback, bags of groceries sweating in the back seat. I got out of my truck slowly. "Everything okay here?" Karen whirled around. "Excuse me, this man doesn't live here. I caught him trespassing." The driver tried to explain, but she cut him off. "I told you no deliveries. You're violating community policy." I stepped between them, calm but firm. "He's delivering groceries to me." She blinked. "You?" "Yep, Commander Holt, house by the dock." Her expression flickered between shock and indignation. "Well, you should know better. This neighborhood has rules." I gave her a polite smile. "Karen, this is a public easement road, not HOA property," she sputtered. That's not true. I've lived here 12 years." The driver looked like he wanted to melt into the seat. I gave him a reassuring nod. "Go ahead, sir. I'll make sure you get through." He hesitated, then slowly drove past, eyes wide. Karen, meanwhile, was on her phone. "You can't just let people... I'm calling the police." I raised an eyebrow. "You're calling the police?" "Yes. Someone has to uphold the law." I tried not to laugh. "Well, good news. You're already talking to them." She froze mid-dial. "You're... what?" I held up my badge. The reflection of gold in her sunglasses was priceless. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. I didn't know. "I know," I said, keeping my tone even. "You're fine, Karen. Just don't block delivery drivers again, all right?" She muttered something about protocols and stormed back to her golf cart, peeling off like a NASCAR driver. The delivery guy looked back at me through his mirror and mouthed a silent thank you. I thought that would be the end of it, but I should have known better, because HOA Karens never lose quietly. The next morning, I was sipping coffee on my porch when a white envelope slid under my door. It had the HOA logo stamped on top, a gold pine tree, and the words, "Lakeside Ridge, preserving peace since 1984. Inside was a letter titled, in bold font, Notice of community violation. Apparently, my unauthorized grocery delivery had disturbed neighborhood tranquility and set a poor example for community compliance. At the bottom, signed in thick cursive, Karen Whitmore, HOA President. I actually laughed out loud. Then I stapled the notice to my fridge. It was too perfect. At work, my sergeant caught me chuckling. "What's funny, Commander?" I showed him the letter. He read it twice, then grinned. "You've been here a month and someone's already trying to write you up." "Someone named Karen," I said. "Big surprise." He smirked. "You gonna let it go?" "Maybe," I said, "unless she tries to push it further." That maybe lasted about 36 hours. On Friday, I came home to find 2 HOA board members standing in my driveway, clipboard twins matching windbreakers. They looked like a pair of mall cops who got lost on their way to a sale. "Mr. Holt," one of them said, "we're here to discuss your compliance hearing." "My what now?" "Mrs. Whitmore has reported repeated violations of the community noise and access policy. There'll be a review Monday at 9 a.m. You're expected to attend." I stared at them for a long second. "A review? For buying groceries?" They exchanged a nervous glance. "Yes, sir. The HOA has a zero-tolerance policy for disruptions." I smiled. "Right, I'll be there." When they left, I walked inside, sat down at my desk, and pulled out a folder labeled Public Access, Lakeside Ridge. Here's something most people don't know. When you're a police commander, you get real good at reading land deeds, especially when certain people try to enforce laws that don't exist. So I checked the records. And oh, it was beautiful. The road leading to my cabin, the one Karen stood on to block that delivery, wasn't owned by the HOA. It was part of a county easement created back in 1979. The HOA's boundary map stopped 50 feet short of it, meaning she'd been standing on public property, meaning her rules weren't worth the paper they were printed on. I couldn't wait for Monday. When I walked into the HOA office, really just the clubhouse by the lake with stale coffee and motivational posters, the board was already seated. Karen at the head table, tapping her pen like she was presiding over a Supreme Court hearing. "Mr. Holt," she said sweetly, "thank you for joining us." "Always a pleasure." She smiled in that way people do right before they try to ruin your week. "We've received multiple complaints regarding your disregard for community policy. Would you care to explain?" I set my badge on the table gently. "Sure thing. But before we start, I'd like to clarify jurisdiction." Her smile faltered. "Jurisdiction?" "Yes. You mentioned community access policy. Could you tell me which parcel of land that policy covers?" Her pen hovered. "All of Lakeside Ridge, naturally." "Right." I flipped open the folder and slid a map across the table. "According to county records, this section here," I pointed at the shaded road, "is outside HOA boundaries. That's the road where your last complaint occurred." Karen blinked. The other board members leaned forward, confused. "So technically," I continued, "you don't have the legal authority to enforce anything there, which means by blocking that road, you may have violated county obstruction statutes." Her face went pale. "That's ridiculous," I smiled. "Don't worry, I'm not pressing charges yet." The room was dead silent. Even the air conditioner seemed to pause. Finally, one of the board members whispered, "He's right, Karen, that's county property." She slammed her pen down. Well, that's an oversight. We've always..." I leaned back. "You've always assumed, you mean?" For a moment, she just sat there, staring at me like she was doing geometry in her head. Then she stood abruptly. "This meeting is adjourned," and she stormed out. The rest of the board shuffled papers awkwardly. A few even smiled at me on their way out. As I left the clubhouse, I thought that was it. Problem solved. Karen had embarrassed herself publicly. Surely she'd let it go now. But that night I got a call from dispatch. "Commander Holt? Yeah. You might want to come down to the ridge entrance. There's a situation." My stomach sank. When I arrived, I saw flashing lights. My flashing lights. 2 patrol cars were parked by the gate, and standing between them, furious and red-faced, was Karen. She pointed at me as I walked up. "There he is, That's the one! One of my officers turned, eyes wide. Commander, Karen huffed. I told you, he's a rule breaker. Arrest him. The young officer looked utterly lost. Ma'am, this is the commander. Karen froze. What? I gave her my best professional smile. Evening, Karen? Having another rule emergency? She blinked, jaw twitching. You can't. This is harassment. I'll have you removed. Removed from my own jurisdiction? I asked lightly. That'll be tricky. She stared at the badge on my chest, and I swear I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head. The officer tried not to laugh. Everything all right here, sir? Everything's fine, I said. Just a misunderstanding. Mrs. Whitmore here was under the impression she runs the law out here. Karen sputtered. This isn't over. Oh, I'm counting on that, I said, because I already knew she'd make it worse. Karen vanished for a few days after that roadside showdown, which, for a brief shining moment, made the entire neighborhood noticeably quieter. No HOA emails, no passive-aggressive flyers, no early morning clipboards. Just birds, a calm lake, and me grilling in peace. Then, like thunder on a sunny day, it happened. A thick envelope landed in my mailbox stamped, Confidential Personnel Complaint. Inside, to whom it may concern. This letter serves as an official complaint regarding Commander James Holt of Lakeside Ridge, who has abused his authority and intimidated residents. I demand an internal investigation into his conduct. Signed, Karen Whitmore, HOA President. I had to laugh. She'd actually filed a complaint against the police commander for doing his job. I took it straight to our department's legal office. My lieutenant, a bulldog of a man named Carter, read it out loud twice before setting it down slowly. Let me get this straight, he said. A civilian HOA president wants internal affairs to investigate you for stopping her from blocking a grocery delivery? Pretty much. He leaned back and chuckled. She's gonna regret that. How so? He grinned. You know what happens when a complaint comes in, Commander. We check everything, not just the officer, but the complainant too, especially when they're tied to local property boards or public funds. I raised an eyebrow. Meaning? He tossed the file onto his desk. Meaning we are resending the city's public records team to audit the HOA's permits and filings. Standard cross-reference procedure. Let's see how clean her books are. I didn't have to lift a finger. The universe, and a stack of bureaucracy, did the heavy lifting for me. By Thursday, Lakeside Ridge looked like a reality show. County clerks, inspectors, 2 city auditors in gray suits with tablets walking from house to house. And there was Karen, on her porch, in full panic mode, cell phone glued to her ear, barking into the receiver like a cornered chihuahua. Every few minutes, she'd glance over at my cabin, eyes burning holes through my windows. That weekend, she finally cracked. I was cleaning out my garage when her golf cart screeched into my driveway. She didn't even wait for me to look up. You! She barked. You called them, didn't you? I blinked. Called who? The auditors, the inspectors, they're everywhere. They're going through HOA files, asking about maintenance budgets. I leaned against the door frame. Sounds serious. You sure your paperwork's in order? Her voice rose an octave. This is harassment. You're abusing your authority. Karen, I said patiently, you filed a formal complaint. They're just following up. I didn't mean for that, I shrugged. Funny thing about accountability, it doesn't always go the direction you want. She fumed. You think you're so clever, Commander, but I know people, important people. Let me guess, I said. They all own golf carts too? Her nostrils flared. You'll regret this. She spun the cart around and sped off, tires squealing like she was escaping a high-speed chase. I figured that was the climax. Story over. But Karen wasn't done. No, she was just warming up. 2 days later, while I was on duty downtown, I got a call from our precinct desk. Commander, the officer said, trying not to laugh, we have a Mrs. Whitmore here demanding to file an arrest warrant. For who? For you, sir, I sighed. Of course. By the time I got back, Karen was in the lobby, pacing furiously. When she saw me walk in wearing uniform, her jaw dropped. The desk sergeant tried to hide his grin. "Commander Holt, Mrs. Whitmore insists you violated HOA sovereignty." "HOA sovereignty?" I repeated. Karen crossed her arms. "You used your position to humiliate me and disrupt private governance." I nodded slowly. "You mean when I stopped you from harassing a grocery driver? Or when your board found out your HOA's missing $9,000 from its maintenance fund?" Her eyes darted. "That has nothing to do with—" "Actually," said a voice from behind her, "it has everything to do with your complaint." She turned to see Carter walking out of the back office with a clipboard. "City audit found irregularities," he said. "Unauthorized fees, fake invoices, misused funds. Ring any bells?" Karen stammered, color draining from her face. "This is a mistake." Carter shrugged. "Sure, we'll sort it out. But in the meantime, your HOA's financial control is suspended until the review's done." She turned on me. "You did this!" I smiled politely. "You filed the complaint." She stood frozen, trembling. "You'll see, Commander Holt," she hissed. "You haven't heard the last of me." Then she stormed out of the precinct, muttering something about lawyers and conspiracies. Carter waited until the door shut behind her, then turned to me. "You're having way too much fun with this, aren't you?" I laughed. "I'm not doing anything, I'm just living my life, and she keeps tripping over it." He chuckled. "Still, you might want to brace yourself. People like her don't know when to quit." He was right, because the very next week she did something no one expected. She tried to hold a private emergency HOA meeting, except in her panic, she scheduled it in the community boathouse, the one built on county land, technically my jurisdiction, and I had the legal authority to shut it down. By Monday evening, the boathouse parking lot looked like the start of a parade. Golf carts everywhere, folding chairs, a handmade sign that said, "Emergency HOA meeting, members only." I parked a short distance away, lights off. My cruiser probably ruined the private part, but I didn't plan on interrupting unless they crossed a line. Still, curiosity won. I wandered closer, hands in pockets. Inside, Karen stood at a lectern she'd borrowed from the community center. Her voice echoed off the rafters. "Neighbors, the county is trying to seize our autonomy. We must stand together against outside interference." She waved a sheet of paper. "They say our dock isn't up to code. Lies. We've maintained this property for decades." That was my cue. I stepped inside, the creaky floorboards turning heads. "Evening," I said. Half the room went silent. The other half murmured. Karen stiffened. "This is a members-only meeting, Commander Holt." "I'm aware," I said. "Thing is, this boathouse sits on county-owned shoreline. If you're holding official business here, it falls under public oversight. Thought I'd sit in, make sure everything's by the book." She turned bright red. "This is intimidation." "Actually," said one of the older board members, "it's kind of good he's here. The auditors wanted clarification about the dock permit." Karen shot him a glare that could melt steel. "We don't need help from—" A loud clunk cut her off. One of the light fixtures overhead flickered and died, dropping a shower of dust. A couple of people gasped. "Maintenance budget at work," someone muttered. The timing couldn't have been better. I pulled a folder from under my arm. "While we all here," I flipped it open. "I brought copies of the County S property line maps and the marina lease agreements." Karen's voice wavered. "Lease agreements?" "Yep." I laid the papers on the table. Turns out this entire dock and boathouse complex was built on county land back in the 80s. The HOA's right to use it expired 5 years ago. Gasps rippled through the room. One man squinted at the map. "So who owns it now?" I smiled. "Technically, the county, which means the property's under my department's administrative jurisdiction until renewal." Karen's face went from red to white. "You're lying." "Afraid not." I slid another page forward, freshly stamped deed papers. "I filed the renewal request last week. The county approved it this morning." Murmurs grew louder. Someone actually clapped. Karen grabbed the documents, scanned them, then slammed them down. "You can't just take our marina." "I didn't take it," I said. "I'm managing it. Temporarily. The county wanted oversight until the audit's finished. You can still use it, if you follow the regulations." Her jaw trembled. You planned this." I shook my head. "You planned this when you called the cops on a grocery driver and then filed a false complaint. Actions have consequences." One of the residents spoke up timidly. "Does this mean we don't pay dock fees anymore?" "Correct," I said. "Until the HOA's finances are cleared, the marina's fee-free. Consider it a public amenity again." The crowd actually cheered. Karen looked around wildly, realizing the room had turned on her. "You're all fools! He's manipulating you!" But no one listened. People were talking about scheduling real elections, about maybe disbanding the HOA altogether. Finally, Karen grabbed her clipboard and stormed toward the door. "Mrs. Whitmore," I called after her. "You left something." She turned. I held up a small paper bag. "Your groceries. Delivery guy dropped them off at my place by mistake. Figured I'd return them." A few people laughed. She didn't. She snatched the bag and stomped out into the night, golf cart sputtering away. For the first time since moving in, the neighborhood actually felt like a neighborhood. No flyers, no citations, no policy patrols. Just people talking over the water, kids fishing from the dock, and the smell of someone barbecuing near the shore. A week later, I got an official notice. The county had completed its audit. The missing funds were accounted for, mostly poor bookkeeping, and Karen had resigned as HOA president for personal reasons. The new board chair, a soft-spoken retired teacher named Linda, stopped by with a thank you basket. "We're sorry about all that trouble," she said. "You've been more patient than anyone deserved." I smiled. "Comes with the badge." She hesitated. "So what happens to the marina now?" "The county's turning it over to community management," I said. "I'll stay on the paperwork for a few months, make sure it runs smoothly. After that, it's yours again." Linda looked relieved. "Maybe we'll name it after you." I laughed. "Please don't. I get enough attention as it is." That evening, I walked down to the dock alone. The lake was glass smooth, the sky streaked with pink and gold. Somewhere across the water, a loon called, its echo fading into the trees. I leaned against a piling and let the quiet settle in. For once, nobody was shouting about rules or property lines, just peace. My phone buzzed, a text from Carter. "Audit closed. Case dismissed. Enjoy your lake, Commander." I smiled, slid the phone back into my pocket, and watched the sun dip below the ridge. Karen had tried to control everything, rules, people, even groceries. But in the end, she'd handed me the very thing she wanted to protect: calm authority. And for the first time in a long while, Lakeside Ridge finally lived up to its slogan: preserving peace since today.